Let's give it up for Raynald, please. So, who is your patron Orisha?
Ogun.
Oh, no, you stole that from him. You got to have your own. Why Ogun?
Well, I'm a fighter. I take a lot of risk as well. And I don't give up. And I like to discover a lot of things.
Tunde, how about you?
Well, I will go for Egungun, the ancestral spirit.
Oh, yes.
Because they performed in front of my grandfather's house. And from that point, I've been fascinated by the performance under mask. So, for me, I come from the line of Ogogo Kulodo, so I'm Egungun, the masquerade.
And you've read, of course, Death and the King's Horseman. Wole's play, Death and the King's Horseman.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and you know Egungun plays a crucial role, the masquerade, in that play.
Well, perhaps I should volunteer this information that Professor Wole Soyinka likes Egungun. Most of his public productions have included a retinue of masquerades.
Yes, that's true. How did you two team up? How did you find each other?
I found Tunde in 2021, early 21, through Mahen, who is the president of the New York African Film Festival. So I was already working on the film with Henry Druel, who's in the room somewhere. And I was also working with Zeca Ligeiro in Brazil to do all the research on the Bahia, Brazilian, and obviously Yoruba influences. So we hooked up, and I emailed him. He replied right away. He saw my first two films, and I told him about this concept, and he said, we need this. We need to get this film done. Our kids are going away. The whole concept of Yoruba is evaporating in Nigeria. And then I said, there's only one person I need. It's Professor Soyinka. Can you get me Professor Soyinka?
Wole, you granted him an extensive interview and close proximity during COVID. What is wrong with you?
Well, you know, we have what we call a jesara. The nearest translation, I suppose, would be kind of inoculation. So, motiji a jesara lati Ibadan ti bí mi. That is, I had eaten some mysterious inoculation. So I was not afraid of some diaspora character coming to do and bringing anything he wanted. Didn't bother me.
Well, it's something we've talked about many, many times over decades, and that the four of us had dinner together last night, and we talked about this. What is it about? Well, let me back up a little bit. Certain positivistic historians or social scientists reduced the usability, as it were, of Yoruba to timing, because of the Dahomey Oyo Wars, because of the rise of the sugar plantations in Cuba. A significant number of the last enslaved Africans to arrive at certain parts in the New World were Yoruba. So they say that explains it. I have never, ever accepted that. People only use what's useful. They discard what's not useful to them. So if that's right, what is it that's useful about Yoruba that allowed it to become a Pan-African religion, that allowed it to survive the ravages of the slave trade first and slavery itself, and even to adapt to Roman Catholicism?
You used two words sort of coterminously in a way, which, and that has to do with Yoruba and Pan-Africanism. No, I don't go the Yoruba route to Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism, for me, is too political and therefore narrow in relation to a cultural pantheism. You understand the difference? And so that bothers me a little bit. But basically, what is contained, especially the ethical principles that are lived in, that create what you might call the Yoruba community, if those are lost, I think the foundation, the available foundation stones for world solidarity, harmonious coexistence, problem solving, etc., it'll be a tremendous loss. Now, people are very fond of saying that, especially with institutions like UNESCO, that no spoken language is too trite to be lost. At the same time, the same people, however, designate indigenous languages, indigenous cultures as diabolical, primitive, and even retrogressive. I find that strange contradiction, especially as language, as you know, is the warehouse of not just communication, but culture, of philosophy, of creativity, even technology. And so on the one hand, you say, oh, let us make sure we preserve, even if we're publishing books, just about 100 books in a particular language, just to keep it alive. So when it comes to books, you see, there's a kind of framework which is positive. But then the content, the manifestation, the precipitates of knowledge contained in the culture are then designated evil and trivial and unimportant, not even dangerous. So I always find that very curious, you know, in the attitudes of even the scholars, of so-called leaders, political leaders, cultural leaders. When it comes, they flinch a little bit. They can come later on and say, oh yes, culture, culture, but they first flinch. That's sad.
We're all familiar with the fact that so many masterpieces of African art in general were destroyed by the Christians, by the colonizing Christians. But to see this happening again on the part of fundamentalists, Islamic fundamentalists, Pentecostal, particularly fundamentalists within the larger Christian arena, you know, other churches, the Roman Catholics, the Anglicans seem to have made peace with the other deities, but not the Pentecostals. Why? What is that about?
When you talk about the fundamentalists, for instance, my mind just shot straight to one emir. Yeah, you talked about the Islamic fundamentalists. One emir, just about 2 years ago, as recently as 2 years ago, actually had the audacity to forbid a procession of traditional religionists on their own soil. You know, that's the kind of thing we still have to cope with at this stage of human development, of intellectual progression. That somebody will get up and say, no, you cannot tread, you cannot dance, chant, worship on your own ancestral soil. The implicit insult and racism and slavish mentality which still dominates so many areas of African society are just staggering and sort of keeps you on a kind of state of anger, you know, spiritual anger, cultural anger, community anger, unnecessarily when you can be devoting your emotion to more, you know, fruitful areas. And when you look, let me sort of cut things short and just point one thing out about Yoruba religion in particular. Unlike these so-called world religions, I push this line all the time, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, whatever, you will not find any authentic African religion. I'm not talking about cultism now. You know, many people conflate the two conveniently. But you'll not find any African religion which has gone to war, even local war, over the religion from that section of African continent. Now, it's a moral lesson which can only be spread, be demonstrated, illustrated by the practices associated with the spirituality, the productivity of that kind of society. And so to go back, I've forgotten to say what started me off, but to go back to what I said earlier, you know, the celebration of these indigenous religions and practices is something which at least will keep us on our toes to remind us that there is a worldview practiced, not just theoretical, not academic, but a worldview in the actual self-perception of human beings that exist on the African continent. Yoruba, I agree with you, Olupono, takes the lead. I mean, it's objectively speaking.
When did you first start thinking about the Yoruba origins of Vodun, or commonly known as voodoo?
When I was in Haiti and I filmed the Haitian film, The Spiral, and, it really started when I was informed. I didn't realize that during the Haitian Revolution, the tribes that came together were from various factions of the African continent. They were Congo, they were Yoruba. So they all got together, which showed that you can all get together and take down an empire. So that's when I started to realize that Haiti, for example, was a fragment of multiple tribes, and I started to learn about the Congo tribes, the Yoruba tribes in Haiti, the Benin tribes, and that's how I started. That was in 2014.
But you didn't deal as much in the film about the way voodoo, is a metaphor for all that's evil and dark in the deepest parts of the black psyche. Why is that?
Because I wanted to focus this film on the Yoruba. I didn't want to, this could be a 3-hour film, by the way. Sure. That was the idea at some point. So part one, I wanted to do part one as more of a master class with the masters of understanding, which I didn't know when I first started the film, what is Yoruba, and what the definition of Professor just now puts it all together in one place. It's a way, it's not just a religion, it's a way of understanding humanity and how one can work with another. And the fact that they have never had within themselves with cultural civil wars within their groups shows something very interesting about their culture. And when I went to Brazil, I was actually even more interested in the fact that a lot of the Afro-Brazilians, not just the black Brazilians, the white Brazilians, the mixed race, where a lot of them were practicing the Yoruba religions. And when you see this, the part of the Brazilian part, some of them are more in tune of their ancestors than some of the Africans that was filming in Lagos. So they were even more interested. Yeah.
Oh, it's true in Cuba too.
Oh yeah. Cuba is another story right there. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So why in the world did you want to make this film? What moment? Give us the history of this film from, oh my God, you know, the eureka moment in the middle of the night to deciding to outline it and then to raise funds.
Sure. It started with Haiti because I wanted to make a film in Haiti, and the Haiti film talked about the voodoo, the spirituality of the Haitian Revolution. It talked about the chaos of the Haitian culture to this day, and we were talking about it last night, the price it paid for the revolution. So from Haiti, I went to my cousins in Cuba. It was more like discovering, discovering the path.
You swam
50
miles from Haiti to Cuba.
So from Haiti, I went to Cuba, and I started working on the film on Alejo Carpentier, Real Maravilloso,
right,
which was a precursor to magical realism. Right. But Carpentier's Real Maravilloso it was really taken from the Haitian Revolution. And a lot of that was adapted in the Cuban Revolution as well. So we know that Fidel used a lot of the essence of the Haitian Revolution to take down Batista and the people around him. So from that point on, it made all the sense in the world for me to explore the homeland. And the homeland for me was either Benin or Yoruba, and I went to Yoruba.
Interesting. And what do you want? What is your goal for this film?
I want to sell the bloody thing. For fuck's sake.
Amen. Amen.
And I think it's got a message, and I like it to find a distributor for it. And I want to continue as well. I didn't do 2 hours because part one talks about sort of the master class. I want to, in part two, I'm looking for the younger generations that I've already looked at of young Yoruba from all sides of the Atlantic from the African side, the London side. These are the younger generations, and some of them are applying a lot of these skills, a lot of their culture, and we want them to talk about it before it disappears. And the final piece is when I went to see Professor Soyinka, I didn't have a beginning, a middle, and an end to the film. I just wanted him to help me. But he actually gave me, as a contributing writer, the storyline for the series. We started with a masterclass, and then we started with the understanding the diaspora, and the finishing part really is the returnees. I think there's a beautiful piece coming up for that, this reverse journey back to the homeland.
Yeah.
And sort of drowning the Mediterranean right now, see some of his immigrants coming back to the country.
But how would you like the film? What work do you want the film to do in terms of education? Do you want it to be, well, I don't want to give you clues, but I'm curious.
No. I think the film is going to let people look at a culture that manifested itself in multiple continents, and the Yoruba are one of the few tribes I've looked at that have continued to practice their culture.
Right.
And to me, that's, if you understand where you come from, it's very important to tell your children, your ancestors, where they come from as well. And I think a lot of people are lost right now with the wrong narratives of African heritage, and should start looking to the other side of the continent to better understand where they come from.
Yeah, there's a lot of myth-making, wishful thinking in certain schools of Afrocentricity that had very little use as far as I'm concerned, and very little truth. But this has history on its side, right?
That's correct.
Tunde, as a Yoruba filmmaker, why is this film important for Nigeria and for throughout the diaspora?
Well, Raynald's film is just an extension of my work. When I left film school in the late 70s and came back to Nigeria, I knew exactly what I was going to do with what I had learned. And I decided to focus on, to express myself, to share my cultural experience in my own mother tongue. Uh-huh. So most of the film, and I went to the academics. I started to adapt the literature, Yoruba literature, and then of course, the concept of global cinema I found is indigenous. All other countries make the films in their own mother tongue. So why Nigeria? Why Yoruba? Yoruba cinema is therefore very valid as far as I'm concerned. And that's what I have been doing, using what I learned, my art, to promote, to preserve, to conserve the Yoruba literature, history, spirituality, and the knowledge system. That's what I've been doing. So I've been doing it consistently for so long that I'm no longer surprised. Anybody knocks my door and say, "Are you Tunde Kelani?" Yes. You are mentioned by somebody from New York. And this has taken me in unexpected places. For instance, I'd never in my imagination felt I'll be sitting together with you on this stage at Harvard University tonight. So essentially, I see a threat because there's been a discontinuation or disconnection with the next generation. And parents in Africa have abandoned their responsibility. They have abandoned the mother tongue. They have not passed on to next generation. Mm-hmm. So that's why Raynald's film is important by so many standards, because it draws attention back and draws young people back. Perhaps there's hope. I hope, that like a river that forgets its source and run, I hope that Yoruba culture and world will not disappear.
Wole, how, as an educator, and how are we doing for time? Justin?
10 minutes.
We have 10 minutes. Great, thank you. Yeah, we have to clear because they're actually having another screening following us. Wole, how ideally would you like to see Yoruba culture perpetuated and back home? I mean, through the school system, through the home, what, how? In terms of the language, in terms of the cosmology, you know?
It's a multi-directional process. You have to use virtually everything, from traditional cuisine, which some of our youths view with contempt. They would rather eat hot dogs and hamburger. So you begin even from any level whatsoever and exposure, that's the main thing. Yes, I would like to see the culture, the Yoruba culture, and indeed African cultures as disciplines in themselves, as just the same way as we used to study Greek, Latin, obsolete languages, and so on, and cultures, embedded as a regular, as a routine discipline to be studied, and notes to be exchanged in extramural institutions for those who've lost the opportunity. And then, of course, the festivals play a most important role. I just remembered something. I talked about cuisine. In the University of Ife, for instance, there used to be a cultural festival every year at one stage. And we picked a theme. And it's incredible how people were surprised when one year we used the theme food security, which is really a channel for exposing items, snacks, full meals, and so on, whose preparation existence had been long forgotten, even among adults. And we were able to even use it to invite dentists to set up clinics and give free treatment, after chewing and you lost your teeth, go to the clinic, and methods like that, including festivals, of course, elaborate festivals. This is why we started, for instance, in Lagos, the Black Heritage Festival, and going into the theme, the Black in the Mediterranean Blue, just to let people understand that it hasn't been a one-way flow of cultural education, and that Africa, through the colonizing nations, actually spread her wings in so many directions over Europe. And so we would pick one colonizer state. Let's use Portugal, for instance, since we spoke about Brazil, and then we'd relate to Portugal, and through that interact with the poets, the musicians, the sculptors of Brazil, because Brazil is at the other end. And that way we're able to show people for the first time, for many people, demonstrate the fact that no, these things, even when some of the racist leaders denigrate these cultures, in fact, their ancestors benefited, sometimes not legally, but benefited, profited from what they took from the African continent. There has to be, of course, a basic principle by law of equality.
The United States of Africa. And Lumumba agrees with Kwame Nkrumah, because remember, Ghana's independent in 1957. Congo becomes independent 3 years later in 1960. So Lumumba announces that he will be in partnership with a United States of Africa. And of course, there is no United States of Africa and not on the horizon. What can we do, or what work, again, I'm gonna use the metaphor of work. What work can your film do to help Black people understand their relationship to each other? Not a literal, regional, physical United States of Africa, but a diasporic, spiritual, or culturally connected United States of Africa, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I think if you watch the scene where the Margaret Menezes, when I filmed her, she was not Minister of Culture. She was of Brazil, which is the largest, after Nigeria, Afro population in the world. When she was inaugurated as Minister of Culture, she thanked everybody, and at the end, she thanked the Orishas.
Yes.
So if you start looking at a woman that probably came from enslaved people over 300 or 400 years, who continues at the level she is to practice what was supposed to be banned 200 years ago. That's the beginning of something I think we could put together. I think it's really bringing people like her around and maybe getting her more involved in the conversation about, because she goes to Africa, but when she goes to Africa, she's not really given the right directions to go to. And I think we as filmmakers, for example, she should be meeting Tunde Kelani. She should be talking to Professor Soyinka. And as a professor said to me one time, and you said that to me, schools in America, schools in South America should be teaching the Haitian Revolution as well. So give us kids a sense of pride of a heritage, as opposed to continuing to show the gangsters, the drug dealing part of the culture,
Well, since Black history is about to be banned or made illegal, when the woman who's up for being the head of the Secretary of Education was asked, I can't remember exactly, you could fact check me on this, but some question like, would teaching Black history be legal under your leadership? She said, I'll get back to you on that. Meaning she had to check with the boss to see if it's on the list of forbidden things. Wole, I've always been fascinated with how Jewish people use Hebrew school, self-funded, in order to teach Hebrew language, to teach the Hebrew Bible. If Jews had to depend on the state to teach and perpetuate their history and culture, there wouldn't be Jewish history and culture. What state would have done that, right? How can we, Black people in Nigeria, Black people in the United States, should we be thinking about our own institutions, like Sunday school, for example, instead of teaching about the Ten Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount, teach that, but also teach about the Orisha, for example?
Well, there was a hint, well, more than just a hint, in the film there, my dream of, I use the word even flotilla, but I'd be quite content with a ship or two. And to have a reverse journey, which would be an annual event, it will happen, and it's not as arcane as it sounds, because we have already hundreds of thousands of Black Americans and Africans in the diaspora who make Africa, somewhere in Africa, an annual pilgrimage.
Yes, spending billions of dollars.
That's right. We have the Heritage Trail, for instance. I attended one of their meetings in Barbados. Quite a number. They go in groups, and classes are held already. Now, I have proposed, and we're still working on, and I believe it's coming closer now, an annual reverse journey. Reverse journey, which would be in a boat, in a vessel, which would be totally Africa motifed. And we'll have exhibitions, you'll have classes, you'll have, of course, the usual tourist gadgets on board to keep people, to vary what they're learning on the boat, casino and so on. In other words, a cruise ship, which, however, is a reverse slave ship, in which will stop virtually at every port which had anything whatsoever to do with the slave trade, positive or negative. And you have on board African healing clinics, you have crafts, painting, modern, music, of course. It'll be filmed, it'll be live, and live from that boat would be disseminated via a collaborating television station, interviews, and so on. You have literature classes, you have epic recitals on board, everything. Pharmacology, traditional pharmacology. That's one thing which I was hoping you would go the Ifa way. So there was even the richness of pharmaceutical knowledge in Yoruba culture. And that will become an annual event. And I believe it's something which will pay for itself. In fact, studies have been made, and it's a viable We nearly pulled it off some years ago in Lagos during the 50th anniversary of the creation of Lagos State. Very close, very close. Unfortunately, there was a hitch at the last moment. And we've had a trial run, by the way, using Palermo as the takeoff point.
Right.
For the simple reason that Palermo is one of the Mediterranean cities which is taking on the responsibility, let me use that word, not burden, the responsibility of a humane treatment of migrants, whether they're illegal or legal, no, not important. And the boat took off from Palermo and went to Turin. So it was 2 nights there, 2 nights back, and we brought artists from Africa and the diaspora. We had exhibition, we had workshops. Nike, the batik maker, held workshops over there as a kind of prototype. It was backed by the mayor of Palermo, Orlando, the former mayor, you know, the one who taught the mafia a lesson, and was one of the most progressive politicians in Italy. 2 nights there, 2 nights back. And it was most instructive. And the life on the boat, we didn't try to replicate a slave boat, no. It's just,
No, you
just
don't want to.
travel using African artists, teachers, giving lessons and expositions. And we believe that can take place from Brazil, you know, through Cuba, the Caribbean, and then cross over, land in one of the Mediterranean seas. Then the west bulge of Africa, along Monrovia, Essaouira, a town, a city, which was founded by escaping slaves escaping across the Sahara, oil, manumission, things like that. Bring those things, historical monuments, in fact, living monuments to world attention, etc., etc.
Justin will be setting up a table, selling tickets to this thing. and we take every form of payment. What?
So Skip, I guess what the professor is saying is that's part of the piece, the last piece of the film was also part 3 of our series.
Yeah.
Why don't you and I think about doing this together, a returnees piece?
Oh no, we've already. I'm already in on his side. You know, I'm handcuffed, shackled. You know, I'm on that ship. But we'll talk about it at dinner. One quick thing: we're being thrown out of here. Any wisdom to be found among the Orisha in the fight against fascism and totalitarianism?
Any reason to be back among the Orishas?
And any wisdom that Americans might
Yeah.
garner?
Well, some of them already are. You do have shrines, even in Harlem, you know, Orisha shrines, and you have what are they called now? Anyway, they're shops. We deal with Orisha items. I've attended a sort of, you know, candomblé in the south. I believe at one time, in fact, there was a Yoruba quote-unquote kingdom with a king and so on in the United, right here in the United States, and people, not just the blacks in the States, people are looking for alternatives in a world that goes crazier and crazier every day. The values of the West and the East are being constantly re-examined. The very fact that there is already, even among the youth, a trickle of a reverse journey to roots and an increased security. So I think it's been the most natural thing for American blacks to take just a bit more seriously, not just as a holiday and an exotic interruption from going to Cannes and visiting the Pope in the Vatican and so on. For a change, visit the Babalorisha in Ife and so on and so forth. These are alternatives, that's all.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Raynald Leconte, Tunde Kelani, and Wole Soyinka.